and joining me.
Hey, everybody.
Hey there. Yeah, very excited that you're here. And so you've written a blog post I don't know, I think like a few weeks ago about testing. Perhaps you could introduce yourself a bit first.
Sure. All right. Wow, what's to tell? So I've been working in education technology for about 20 years. Right now, I'm a director of software engineering at Power School. I got a great team there. Really excited about the work that we're doing. Let's see. I'm a AWS community builder, which is one of the communities that you and I are connected through, Sebastian. The other one, is, of course, is the CDK community. We can Slack each other in different ways there. I also was a co-author of a book called The TypeScript Workshop. That was a really exciting opportunity that came out fairly recently. I'm really into serverless. I'm really into cloud, and I'm really into like how can we bring a better I also want to stop saying DevX because we're talking about testing here, and I got some awesome QA engineers that I work with, and how can we solve some of those kinds of problems? And it's not just QA. It's like the whole holistic picture here of how can we build and ship software faster, safer, better, all kind of those kinds of things. So the blog post, the problem that I was trying to solve there is that I think take a quick step back here. Sorry. I often find myself in the position that I'm working in some sort of data integration. It could be a data integration that is, maybe we're modernizing a system and we have a new database. It's a totally different structure or something. So we say, how do we migrate the data from the old database into the new database? It could be that we are decomposing a monolith. That's another use case here, where we say just a subsection of this needs to come out of the legacy and get updated. It could even be like I've had experiences where it's like a year-over-year turnover where the data in our production system is only relevant for that year, but we need it for analytics purposes in a different database. Yeah. And in addition to all that, lots of third-party integrations, data integrations. And so like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. In the old days, you would have like a massive Java application that would just kind of try to crank through. Maybe it's triggered by cron, maybe it's triggered by REST API, and it just tries to crank through this whole thing and say, okay, like I'm just going to start at the beginning and I'm going to do all this stuff. And if it goes out of memory or fails or there's an uncaught exception somewhere, it's like, oh well.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe it's just a database script, right? And it's this huge SQL statement of select and then writes later in it. And you just kind of work and sweat over that, and you hope that you type the whole thing out correctly. And then we're going to execute that, and we're just going to hold our breath while that goes. So, cloud native services, EventBridge, Lambda, SQS, working with these kinds of things, we can make this problem so much better. We can make this so much easier to manage, so much more reliable, repeatable. We can break down our jobs into smaller steps, and we can like just feel like that. This is we've made some real progress here, but then how do we test it, right? Because we can build a beautiful data integration, and maybe if it's only going to execute once, then great. We build the beautiful data integration. We got eyes on it. We're building it the right way. We don't necessarily need some test automation if it's going to go once and then we're done with it. Okay. But what if it's a system like a partner integration, like a partner data integration, where we're saying we want eventually consistent data with maybe with multiple partners? These things can get really complicated, and while we're building them, we might be able to do like a really excellent job of building this whole thing out.
And you're using the AWS CDK essentially to model to model the infrastructure, like to to build data pipelines. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Honest?
Managing the infrastructure with AWS CDK, I found that to be like a really excellent tool to build step functions and manage Lambda functions and all of that kind of stuff. I would say that the concern that I start to have with testing is that we've built a wonderful system, a very very efficient data integration. It's very cheap. It works quickly. It's eventually consistent. All the things that we love, and now that thing is going to operate, and we're going to have changes to the system, and we want to be able to continue to iterate very quickly on that. And the only way that we're going to be able to effectively do that is with some sort of test automation. It needs to enter the picture somewhere, and that is
in previous contexts, like have you done like actual real test driven workflows like before AWS CDK, like in like classical?
Well, no, but I mean, I don't think that that speaks well to those approaches, right? I mean, so we're trying, I feel like there was a way that we did things 10 years back. There was a way we did things 20 years back, and we're looking for something new on these kinds of data integrations. We're looking for, there's a reason EventBridge exists, right? And there's a reason that we want to use it. There's a reason for step functions. These things, they're really wonderful things, and they're great to use. And you're right. Like, we didn't have great test automation on that massive Java contraption. We didn't have any kind of tests on the database script, right? Maybe someone somewhere did, but we sure didn't, and most people didn't.
Like a QA department, or like
I mean, it's manual testing, and but it's usually it's a QA person or a QA department or something like that who has the responsibility of saying, is the system still functioning correctly? And we can do that now too. Absolutely, we can do that now. But that
is going to all the time. Yeah.
We are doing that now for sure. We're absolutely doing that. But that approach, I think that approach detracts from. I mean, I'm not saying don't manually test, but if we can't automate some of these things, I think that detracts from the whole picture. I think that we can have wonderful infrastructure as code where we don't have to say, Jira ticket, please provision server for me, and then someone's going to go off and start stacking racks or whatever the expression is. But I mean, if there's a testing gap there, and we're not able to fill that place, then it's gonna mess with the having like a really good development cycle, right? Because you can build these things, you can affect change really quickly, but then if you say, well, okay, now we need 2 weeks to test it, you're not really succeeding. So that's where I was searching for, how can we do this? And I was working with some people on my team, and trying to figure out, what can we do to solve this problem? How can we test this efficiently without having to just say, well, basically we manually test, and that's the best that we can do. And I'm talking specifically here about asynchronous workflows, right? So you've got
like event-driven workflows, or like this EventBridge thing, for example, or step function workflows. Okay.
So you
have to trigger that something happens, and then you have to see
your traditional test automation, which could be Selenium or Cypress. I'm a big fan of Cypress, and those things are great for the web application. But when your process is like a cron trigger or some other event or something like that says, wake up and do this job, it's headless. There's not really a great way to automate that from one of those traditional tools. Then we need to look for something else. And so
you found something, apparently.
Well, I mean, I think there are a few people. I think this is an area that hasn't gotten a lot of attention yet. But there are, I linked a couple of other blog posts in my blog post. Of people, there's a couple of open source libraries. There's the what is it, AWS testing tool and the SLS testing tools. So these are extensions to Jest that perform assertions on AWS resources. One of them was a little bit more focused on the actual infrastructure being created, which is another great use case. And one of them was a little bit more focused on using EventBridge. Yes, AWS testing library and SLS test tools, which I mean, I linked the blogs from Paul Swale and Sarah Hamilton. They're great blog posts. I think anybody interested in this space should be going and reading those things as much as they should be listening to me, as much as they should be reading what I've written. But I had a few problems with. I didn't quite see them working in my use case. Let me put it that way. I think it's really good. Sorry.
Why is that? So why were they not working for you in your use case? So because you have the async workflows, or?
No, I mean they're all focused on asynchronous workflows. So they're trying to solve the same problem. I wanted to look for a slightly different solution to the problem, and the kind of the one of the first problems, I kind of broke it down into 3 different issues that I had. The first one is that the expectation is that this is like running Jest, like running the JavaScript testing library Jest, and you're basically external from the deployed services application, and you need some sort of credential that lets you create an event bus event, or you need some credential that lets you read from CloudWatch, or something that lets you subscribe to an SQS queue in order to validate that the test was done. And this is, I mean, it's sort of normal. Like if you start, like if you read my stuff and deploy some of my CDK stacks, you absolutely need to do the same thing.
That's what if you're talking about here, right? So like the page, or like the diagram,
you are
right? So like
you're at your console. You have some sort of credential that gives you access to the AWS account. It's probably a very broad credential in many cases, especially if you're just messing around with development. As you sort of mature in the workflow, you probably have a more narrow credential, and so that's something that I have in my day job, is that we try to have a narrowly scoped credential that has the rights to create the resources it needs and not much else. And so, I just was thinking, do I want to say in my CI/CD pipeline, I need the ability to query a database, which I didn't have before this, and maybe that is a problem that is like a really big problem for some people, and maybe that's like not a big deal for some other companies. It just sort of depends on where you are in your security journey, I think, and how you really want to manage access to AWS accounts and roles and things like that. But it seemed like a little bit of a problem to me, so I wanted to think about, is there a different way to do that? And I started thinking about, well, what if my test runs inside my AWS account, where I create a resource the way I create any other resource, and it just runs there? Is that something that I could do?
So what you mean is you wouldn't necessarily drive it like locally via Jest or anything, like some testing framework locally, but an actual assertion in the cloud, basically, as a Lambda function.
That's right. Yeah. So that was just.
What's the benefit of that?
I mean, I think there's a few different benefits to that. I think that there's a security benefit in that none of the data that is involved in my test needs to escape from the cloud. Now, again, that's like, maybe something you care about, maybe something you don't care about. Kind of depends on what your workflow is. Maybe you only run this test in a QA environment where you don't have any sensitive data anyway, and that could be quite fine. But you may want to run your test against production, and you may have real customer data there, And this could be an additional layer of security where you're saying that I'm executing this test. It does not escape the cloud, only like a pass-fail status or something very simple like that. And so that could give you more confidence in your security posture.
When you say you might want to run a test against your production environment, so are you thinking there about something along the lines of smoke tests, or like actual business logic tests, or like
so that's
function
the
tests?
I mean, I think I think that something like this, it definitely starts as a smoke test. It's a new way to think about how to test resources. Where does it end up? I mean, I think we're early in the journey in trying to see how viable this is. So, but there's another benefit there that I want to talk about, and that's by making this a custom resource, a CloudFormation custom resource using the CDK custom resource construct. We get built-in rollback. So which may be something we want and may not be something we want, right? Like if you want that, then it's really, really good. If you don't want that, then it's terrible because your stack failed and you have no idea why. But if you do want that, if you say, I trust this test and I don't want my application to deploy if this test fails, then by making it a custom resource, and it's part of your stack creation, it's part of your stack update. And so if the test fails, the way I've written it in the blog post and in the sample code, the entire thing is going to roll back. And you're actually going to be able to, hopefully, because CloudFormation is not infallible in that way, but you're hopefully going to be able to restore your stack to the prior state in the event of a test failure. And I think that's a really cool thing. I mean, there are other ways to do that. There are a few different ways to do that in AWS, but this seemed like a really kind of simple way that the whole thing is built in.
Yeah. Well, as long as there's not any state involved, I think that's probably, doable, right? But if you would start to roll back some state, well, I mean, it's probably hard to do state changes as part of a CloudFormation deployment anyway. But at least stateful resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in my blog post, I wrote about an asynchronous workflow. I contrived of like part of a payment application where payments can be received, and then there's a payment failed workflow where you try to put someone into collections. So I use that, and this is the architecture diagram for that. I made that my example because that's kind of where my heart is talking about asynchronous workflows. But you could also use this to do different things. You could say is my VPC set up correctly? You could run a test that does that. You could do is my S3 bucket private? There are various ways to do that in AWS already. Here's one more. You could do different kinds of assertion against the actual resources that you're deploying. And then that rollback option starts to really seem kind of attractive. I mean, it's attractive enough to me, honestly, to say that I've got like my happy path workflow as a test that I'm propagating an event. I'm expecting that event to eventually do something, and then if that fails, then my stack rolls back.
Right. Yeah. Have you had the case already? So since you mentioned that you're using this actually, like not exactly this, but like a similar idea in your work environment, have you had cases which were caught by like this and the stacks were already actually rolled back?
I think that has come up once or twice.
Okay.
Where a test failed and the rollback happened. We use a multi-environment setup. In AWS CDK, so we are deploying to dev and then QA and then production in one after another. So I don't think we've seen like a production rollback as a result of this, but definitely a lower environment where someone thinks a change is good enough and then it breaks one of the tests, and then we get a rollback there. So we try to catch that early in a non-prod environment.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. But I mean, like, sure. I was just thinking about like if you had unit tests before, but unit tests usually don't really cover the integration, like the full integration, of course, and
I mean,
are only like to a certain extent really useful in the AWS CDK context anyway.
yeah, I love unit tests. I even, if you look at my code, I have unit tests against the CDK constructs themselves, which I'm not even promising that that's useful, but it's something I'm trying. If you're writing Lambda code, you should definitely have unit tests, and you should definitely,
Sure.
if you have Lambda code containers, whatever. I mean, if you're writing actual compute and you're writing your business logic out, you should definitely have unit tests for that. But it's as we use more and more, especially like with of course I haven't reacted to this yet, but the announcement that step function supports more than 200 AWS services, we're writing less and less actual compute to build these applications, and so that just means consequentially that it's good. You don't need that unit test to say, does this thing fundamentally work? Because you trust AWS to do that for you.
Yeah, sure. But I've been actually experimenting with, like, since you mentioned like Lambda unit tests, and like, I think for most people this means, as you said, like, having some sort of container which simulates the Lambda environment locally and run the tests there. So what I've been experimenting with is like pretty much a similar approach to what you're talking about, like just deploy it as a test spec, invoke that Lambda function, and do like some pure assertions based on the results there. And like the more or the faster these AWS CDK deployments get, or like general deployments of infrastructure are getting, I think the more like attractive becomes something like this, since you have like the real thing in the end, and you don't have to worry about the last 1 or 2%, which might be different in the end.
Yeah. As we were kind of starting our cloud journey, we were using local stack a lot. We still use a little bit.
Yeah.
It's great if you need to just have S3 or something like that. If you just need to mock 1 or 2 AWS services, it works really, really well for that. But when you're stringing 12 of them together, it doesn't really work anymore. And you're going to be much better off with like a development environment.
Yeah, true. I mean, perhaps let's just look a bit at your at the code base, which is linked in the example. So I did check it out locally already, and we might just dive into it, look at the unit tests which you just mentioned, and look at the entire workflow, how this might work, how this looks like in reality. Hang on 1 second. So there we go. Right. So that's the example application that you published as part of your blog post, if I'm not totally wrong. And I went through this README earlier today, and I was really pleasantly surprised that it actually just worked out of the box. So which is not that common. So pretty good job there.
Thank you.
And perhaps we can dive in like from a high level, like okay, what is this? Like that's essentially the application which we just saw as the architecture diagram. Is that correct? More or less.
Yep. Yeah. So with this, what the the conceit here of this fake payment application is that some other system has processed the payment, and now you're just basically updating your books. So you're getting back a successful payment or a failed payment, and in the event of a failed payment, so that's coming by Event Bridge in this example, just so that I can use Event Bridge basically. And in the event of a failed payment, we want to kick off a collections workflow where it's a step function, it's a state machine that tries to perform the collection, and eventually that's going to either succeed or fail. and then we get updated, and there's I've created an enum of the different statuses that the workflow can go through, so that we could, and it keeps all the state in a DynamoDB. So it's a pretty simple example of how you can get some asynchronous workflows together, but the integration test is going to exercise the event bridge, as well as the step function. So
so the integration test is like a stack by itself, essentially.
The integration test is a nested stack. So let's to understand all this. I think we want to start at app stack. Yeah, the app stack there, and here. Oh no, we want payments app stack. I'm sorry.
All good.
So I did two nested stacks here. So I did this when I built my real application that uses this as a testing mechanism. I made the integration test as a nested stack, and I partially did that just as sort of a defense mechanism, because I said, well, what if this just breaks completely and it starts blocking our path to production, or if it just doesn't work the way I hope it would. I figured that by making it a nested stack, it's easier to just comment it out or delete it or something like that, and then at least I'm not breaking my application. And so that was one of my priorities in doing that. I think it's honestly kind of clean to do it this way, because you really don't want, or at least in my thinking through this problem, I didn't want my app stack and my nested stack to share resources, right? I want my test stack to execute a test, right, as the main thing. I don't want it to actually be, sharing resources in a totally meaningful way. So I do pass in the event bus name and the table name, so that those can be utilized, but you can still delete the stack, and the rest of it would still exist. And then of course there's the stack dependency, which says I clearly do not want to start executing my integration test until my regular stack has been fully deployed. So this part's really easy.
Right. So it runs after the app stack has been deployed successfully, and then the integration stack.
Yeah. So CloudFormation. I mean, this could be done in a different way, all within the same stack, but you'd still want to use the dependency, because you need to make sure that finishes. Otherwise, CloudFormation is going to run things in any order it wants, of course. And then finally, there's a CFN output step there where I want to output the test results. So that's all part of the custom resource construct, which is really what's in that integration stack. We can look at the app stack first. So the app stack is going to...
one more question about the integration test stack, or the nested stack concept, since I'm not really familiar with that. If that nested stack would fail, and it would be stuck in some state, would it be possible to just isolate this, remove it from the parent stack, or is this blocking then as well?
So you mean if we get into the dreaded CloudFormation rollback failed, or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they say you have to wait for an hour or so until it's.
I haven't had that experience. I don't actually know. So what happened? So okay. I mean, I think that given it's serverless, it's not connected to a VPC, theoretically could be. You could start to get into some hairy things depending on what you want to put in it. I mean, I think that would definitely be a risk. I think, my experience using CloudFormation, which mostly been positive, I would say that you need to be promoting your stack through multiple environments, and you need to have it blow up before you get to production, and then not have that happening once you get into production, and prioritizing that as a workflow is going to be one of the better ways to operate something like this.
Yeah, that's true for pretty much all the infrastructure as code tools. Yeah. So similar situations with Terraform.
But I don't promise that you will that would never happen with this. I don't say. I mean, I think that the original reason for nested stacks was to get around the CloudFormation resource limits, which was 200 for a long time. I believe it's 500 now. But by creating nested stacks, you could create you could get more. So obviously here we're not going to have anywhere close to that number, but I still think it's kind of a good organizational unit to say, this integration test is kind of a unit by itself. I mean, it could eventually, maybe even evolve into a level 3 construct that is the whole stack, and that would be kind of like a clean way to separate it out.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So here's the actual application stack. There's a lot of different ways to do a CDK application. This is mine. I just like to make sure that each TypeScript module is fairly small. I like to be able to fit it on a screen if I can. And so so here there's a get table function that will create the DynamoDB table construct. Everything is there, and then since I need to pass it around, I'm assigning it to the stack as a local variable.
All right,
Same
so
with
you
the
actually
Lambda
have like some sort of builder function pattern to create this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Sometimes I do some reduce. I don't know.
Yeah,
it might be ugly to read for some people.
I'm so used to this, this class, some construct name extends from whatever it is here, construct, I think.
I mean, honestly, I prefer functional programming paradigms. I know that there's like there's a CDK functional programming library out there, which I looked at a little bit. I haven't had a chance to really get my hands on it and say, hey everybody, we need to start doing this from now on. But I do go for the functional programming paradigms. I like, I like defining a function that has a pure function with inputs and outputs, and avoid side effects and just try to keep things really clean like that. Now, if you're not used to reading reduce functions, then you might not like that as much. And I sympathize with that. In this case, I realize that for the Lambda functions, there's really only 2 variables that I care about there. One is the function name that I use to refer to the function inside of my application, and the other is the TypeScript file that defines my function. So that's why I created a list of the function names using asconst, which is a TypeScript way to basically define that list as types. So in other parts of the application, I can do Lambda functions .payment success, and TypeScript will understand that is one of the names that could be there, and I can't just type any old thing in there. So I get safe typing in terms of like, here's my list of function names, and then the rest of it can just flow from that. Now, it would obviously get more complicated if I needed to have different timeouts or different runtimes and things like that. I think
if we get into that kind of space. What's a bit surprising about this, like to people at least who are used to AWS CDK style of definition of constructs, is that you share the same scope, right? So like you pass in the stack, and you have like the same scope for all the functions, and it's not really visible in that sense, right? I mean, but yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like so you're essentially staying in the same tree structure on the same level all the time.
That's right. Yes. So these functions would be in the same tree.
That's more or less intentionally in this case, I would assume. Yeah. Okay, cool. Just a little sidetrack. Perhaps that's so when we talk about the app stack and the functions, for example, in this case, I think I remember that there were like a few unit tests around this as well.
So the unit tests for the stacks are right next to them with those spec files. Now, this is
right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not here's my take on something like this, on this kind of on snapshot testing.
I'm curious.
And that kind of thing. My take on it is that if you get good enough at it, if you find a good enough angle to be able to do this so that it's very easy to write these tests and you can just produce them, then I think you can reach the ROI. on whether or not this is a useful test. Now, I've heard people say, criticize this idea of writing unit tests against your stack because it's like it's not testing the deployed stack, right? It's not testing to make sure that I actually created a state machine in the way I intended to. It's only testing really did it CDK synth correctly, which is, it should always do that correctly, right? And I can understand that, but to me, that argument is a little bit like you shouldn't use TypeScript because it doesn't actually give you type safety in production. Well, I mean, so a fact like that is if I don't understand that, type safety isn't, the TypeScript isn't going to, isn't going to enforce strict typing in my production application when I've transpiled it into Node.js or into JavaScript, then I have a big problem. But if I do understand and I see it as a development tool that helps me to make the right choices when I'm making updates and not miss things and not fail to notice that I had some unintended side effect because I bumped a library, because I changed the order of my stacks in some way or something like that. If I understand all of that, then it can be a great tool for productivity, and it can avoid some ugly churn and things like that. So I take the same approach, same philosophy to unit tests for my CDK. I find them fairly easy to write, and I definitely had experiences where the unit test prevented me from pushing something that then immediately would have broken, right? And the consequence of pushing something that immediately breaks into my dev environment isn't that bad, but it's even better if my unit test catches that before I push it.
Yeah, and I think if you like I personally see like two cases, like either you have like really like logic heavy constructs, like where lots of things are happening based on some inputs, it's like a pretty complex thing, and like there are like various branches of execution, and I think in this case it might make sense to have something like this, as opposed to like if you just have like a simple construct which just creates an S3 bucket and I don't know something.
Well, so one thing that I've noticed using snapshots against CDK stacks is that occasionally something changes in IAM. Occasionally someone decides that the implicitly created role that connects two things needs to be a little bit different, and that will show up when I do my library bump. That is going to show up in my snapshot as a test failure, and it's going to show me that change is made. And I care about that a little bit, and I might not notice that. I do actually check out most of the release notes, but probably not all of them. But I do see that impact to my application, and that's I think that's one of the things about using CDK is that it does a lot of things in your account, and it's important to understand what it's actually doing in order to be successful with it. Otherwise, you might be in for an unpleasant surprise. Like case in point, the custom resource construct for the integration test here, it creates a step function, and it uses that to validate that that the test is complete. Well, so if you use that, you suddenly have an additional step function in your account, and to some people that is a problem that this thing just appears, and to me it's okay because I'm watching that and I know what it's going to do, but that's it's a trick about AWS, right? Is that so much is done automatically for us, but we still need such a level of expertise to navigate all of this and to really be effective. It's just a different kind of expertise.
It's certainly opinionated in these workflows, and like it's enabling users to forget about the details, at least for the beginning. But sure, like at some point you really have to understand what's going on there.
Should we look at the integration test stack real quick?
Yeah, hang on. Let's run the unit tests.
You can do an npmt. Yeah, that's.
So what's it doing? Is it's actually synthesizing the stuff?
It's going to synthesize the stack. Yeah. So the way I have jest working, you can actually see the prefixes there slightly. Some of it'll say runs CDK / step functions, and then it'll runs FNS functions payment failure spec. So it's actually running the Lambda unit tests along with the CDK tests. I actually have and I have some other stacks that do some UIs as well using React testing library, and there's a couple of tricks in Jest to get it to really do that, but you can run the whole thing together. I think that's pretty cool. I like running all of my tests, unit tests together as one full stack, front end, back end, and infrastructure.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and so it's like actually the full synth of each of those stacks. So
yeah, because of the way
bundling and stuff. And,
because of the way I did it, you get
fast.
multiple asset bundles, but it's using ES build and Node.js functions, so it's pretty fast.
Yeah. So like if you would change something here, it would actually fail, right? So so it's a snapshot test. That's what you're saying.
If you yeah, I mean, let's
and to name here, it should fail, I suppose, since probably it's gonna, or is it? No, it's probably not.
You could get it to fail by changing one of the count resources. So it's counting a few of those things. Or we could go into the stack and make a change there, and that's going to make it fail. Like you could go into the lambda.ts and you could change the timeout. You could change timeout duration minutes to 2.
Let's do that and see. So it's going to compile implicitly, right? Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the other case, which I usually also refer to when it comes to unit testing, is like when you're going to distribute packages, like either within your organization or like even publicly open source. I think it would make sense. Like in the best case, you have both, right? So like unit test, integration test, but I think unit test would be a great start already, so that you actually make sure that you ship stuff to your consumers, which is working properly, or like at least expected. And yeah, sure enough, we see 2-minute timeouts. But yeah, that's also like a good demonstration of well, the pain of integration test, right? So you changed it like one attribute, and then you have like a bunch of changes, and sometimes it's really hard to find the cause why it's actually changed. But yeah, updating is pretty straightforward.
The advantage here would be that change has to be deliberate, right? Because you have to update your test now. You have to update the snapshot, and hopefully, the danger of snapshot testing is that you get in the habit of blindly updating them and don't look at what the change set is. So don't do that. Find a better way. But if you are looking at that and you're saying, oh, this has changed. Is this a change I wanted to make, or was it not? Then you would be in a good place with that kind of approach.
And so when you think this in the CI setting, so you run the unit tests in GitHub Actions, Circle CI, whatever it is. In the end, once that's succeeding, you would actually deploy. That's the workflow, more or less.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, as part of the deployment, the integration test will run.
Right. So let's look into the integration test. That's a pretty interesting topic, I think. Where do I find this? Models, functions, integration tests.
It's the integration test stack.
This custom resource, right?
Yeah, this uses the custom resource and provider framework, which is so custom resources, of course, are a thing in CloudFormation. But the provider framework is CDK specific. I really love this framework. It's really easy to operate, and you can do all kinds of things with it. So that
So help me again, like a custom resource is like in the end, it's like a CloudFormation resource, which is like a Lambda function in the end, and you have like the create, read, update, delete hooks in that Lambda function, right?
Yep.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, this construct is got a lot of different applications to it. I mean, one of them is you can if CloudFormation doesn't do the thing you need it to do, you can write a custom resource, and now you've got a Lambda function that can use AWS SDK, or it can deploy something that is not part of AWS. If you had some kind of hybrid stack or something like that, I was actually talking to someone about that earlier this week. And that's definitely a way you can go with this. The thing that I think is really cool here is and this is what made me think about using this for integration testing, is the is-complete handler. So this framework, it allows for asynchronous execution. You basically have a what did I call it? Like the first handler. If you scroll up just a little bit. The on event handler. So that's the one that says I'm gonna start this workflow. I'm gonna kick off the test by creating an event bridge event, and that's going to create the workflow. And then there's the is complete handler. And so what this construct does, this basically L3 construct, it's going to create a state machine that is going to execute a Lambda function, the is complete handler, and that is going to execute. And it's going to either wait for, I think it's a true or false response. We'd have to look at the source code for that to totally refresh on it. But yeah, so if any error is thrown at any time, then the whole thing is going to roll back. If the function times out, then you get the rollback. If you get a fail response, then that means that it's not done yet. So try to pull again. And if you get a successful response, it will it'll complete the stack.
Let's just scope here a bit. Sorry about that. So
yeah, so here I just had to pass in.
That's the L3 construct. This provider construct essentially, right? So the step function that you just described.
Yeah,
correct?
And so there's the total timeout is defined. Total timeout can be, according to the docs here, it can be up to 2 hours. I haven't actually tested that, and when I dug a little bit deeper, I couldn't find out why it wouldn't go for longer than 2 hours. Maybe there's a CloudFormation limitation there. I haven't tested that though, but it says that it can run for up to 2 hours. So that's the what's great about this. The way it puts this together is obviously you can't have a Lambda function running for 2 hours. So if you actually needed something to run that long, then it's there for you. Now, in my case, I'm saying that if this hasn't completed after a minute, then I want it to fail because I don't want it to take that long, and it never should. So that's just something that you'd want to set, based on what your application is expected to do.
Okay. So I don't know. Let's have a look. And so you mentioned that which one?
We can pull up the functions themselves. So if we navigate out to
this one, test event, and test is complete.
Yeah. So the test event. This is just going to put an event on the event bus for event bridge. It's there's an environment variable with the bus name, so it knows that. And it's just going to it's putting out 2 events. So I'm putting out a success event and a failure event here. Again, like there's not a lot of detail to what these events are in the real world situation. You might have to store that as a JSON file or something like that, or pull up a few, maybe fire off several different scenarios. But it gives you the idea here.
So like in traditional testing terms, this would be like a fixture, more or less, like like some test data essentially, which you can just generate, or like in this case it's static, but so it's known data which you can just generate, and is there just for test purposes. And it resembles like the event how it would look like in production.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
something that's important to call out here is the version. So that's kind of, in this case, that's how I'm tracking this particular test. Is I'm assigning a version as a resource property in the custom resource, and that version is going to be equal to the current timestamp. Now you could use a UUID or something like that if the timestamp wasn't enough for you. I'm just giving a simple example here. And that's important for two reasons. One is that I need to be able to identify this event, right? Because it could be a live system where other events are coming through. I need to be able to identify this one as the one that
you could
will
have
complete
multiple
the test.
deployments running, like multiple test environments spinning up in parallel or something.
Or it could be someone using the system. I mean, it depends. But so that's one reason. The other reason is that the way a custom resource decides whether or not there's an update happening here, something has to change. So it has the different lifecycle events, right? It has a create. Is this a new resource? Okay, I'm running it because it's new, because it doesn't exist already. An update means something has changed. So in my case, most of the time, it's just going to be this resource property or version, which is a name that I chose, or maybe pulled from an example or something like that. You could name it anything you want. But if that doesn't change, and so that's why I just set it to the current timestamp, because I know that that's hopefully going to continue to change. But if you didn't do that, then you'd be like, oh, this ran the first time, that's awesome, and then it would never run again because nothing's changing. And then of course the last event in the life cycle is delete. If we look at my code, I think if you look at line 7, I'm actually testing for that, and I'm saying if this is a delete operation, I don't need to run an integration test as I tear down my stack, because it won't be there. So I just exit.
But wouldn't it technically still be there, since it's a nested stack, and it should be?
Well, no, this depends on my app stack. So by the time it runs, if it's a delete operation, my app stack has been deleted by now.
Oh, is it not deleting in reverse order?
Maybe you're right. in any case, why do I want to run the test on the thing I'm about to delete?
Yeah, sure. It makes
you might be right.
No sense.
It could run in reverse order.
So I don't know. I'm not familiar with nested stacks, so I don't really know. But yeah, anyway.
So should we look at the is complete one?
Yeah. So that's essentially like publishing the test event, and that's now the Lambda function handler, which is that's executed by the step function. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So this is going to be executed at the interval. I think the default, which I left at the default, is 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, it will execute this function. I think when I run it, I find that it normally executes twice. So it executes the first time, it's not quite done yet, and then it executes the second time. In this case, what I'm doing to validate the test is I am, so state is stored in DynamoDB, so I'm directly querying that database. What might be a little bit cooler is to, pull something out of CloudWatch or find a way to listen for an event. It's a little bit tricky, right? So this can't listen for an event, but can we somehow subscribe something to something else and then have the is complete handler check that? That's a problem I haven't solved. I'd love to hear anyone's ideas about what we can do to make that a little bit better. But I still think in this case, checking the database and saying, did my transaction reconcile by now is a fine way to do it. And then you can see that I'm returning a data.result, and it's a string, and then I can print that string out on the console.
So that's like, these are the like DynamoDB models, which are essentially the production models, and so like it will be the production table, or like whatever table you are referencing, or like have in the stack, right? So it's like, it's not an explicit test instance or like a test table. It's
correct.
The real
thing.
I
mean, you could do something like that too. It'd be fairly easy to do if you felt like I want all this and I want to test everything, but I want to use a different table. I want to have a test only table. I think that'd be quite easy to implement into this stack. I mean, you just have to create 2 tables and name one of them differently, and then you'd have to inject that into the integration test, and you could everything else work the same. In this case, I used DynamoDB Toolbox for the models. You could go and check those. They're really super simple. It's there's not much to it. There's all the enumerated statuses, and the payment is just an ID and a status. Obviously, you would need other data about the payment, but I didn't put it into this example.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, fair enough. Okay. And how do you wire this up? Like, how do you get access to, like, how does this Lambda function get access to the DynamoDB table?
So that's back in the integration stack, I think. I think there's a grant table dot grant read data. Yeah, so the table reference is passed into the stack, and yeah, so I think based on that, you're absolutely right. This gets deleted before the app stack does, because you couldn't possibly delete the app stack first, since it has that table and there's a dependency here. But yeah, so it's using the grant read data.
So which means, like, I mean, sure, it's like just permissions, but like technically there's like not, this is like a bit bleeding across boundaries, right? So I mean, sure, so you have to get state, like you have to get access to this thing somehow. That's the one part.
It is technically, I mean, so you're right, the test function has access to the data and it's able to read it. But it, again, it's all executing in the same AWS account. Nothing can get to the test function, right? The test function is not in any way public. It can't it can't do anything that the custom resource construct doesn't have it do. So, I mean, I think if that's not enough for you, and it's a reasonable position to stake out that that's not enough for you, then I would definitely say the test table option is a great option here, because you can create that really easily. The dozens of items you'll put in the table is not going to cost you any money. There's a lot of good reasons to go that way too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this really largely depends on the purpose of the integration test you're doing here, right? Like, is this like primarily like a smoke test, like making sure that everything works as expected? Then you have to use the actual production data, or like the actual resources. I think like for really pure testing purposes, I would be probably more in the camp of like having like a dedicated testing table somehow to just spin it up and then tear it down later on. But yeah.
That sounds like a really solid idea to me. It'd definitely be a way to do this, and then your test doesn't touch the actual customer data in any way.
So then you're back in the completion, like test complete handler, so which would return the test result, right? So like what you said is, okay, you get the events from the database, you check the status, does it match the expectation?
Yeah, just to explain this a little bit, remember I kicked off 2 events at the beginning. I've got a success event and a fail event, and I want to test them both, because the fail event has a special workflow that it goes through the step functions. So that's why there's 2 queries. There's 2 payment entities, entity.get. The IDs are going to be, so there's just a simple partition key in this table, and the IDs are going to be the version dash either success or failure. So I'm going to get my 2 items back that way, and then oops, console log statements probably don't need to be there, but it's going to say I expect my success payment success response to have a payment status of success, and I'm expecting my payment failure response to either be a collection failure or collection success. I'm expecting that failure to get into the collection workflow and ultimately return a failure or success. And then if all that, if all that is Boolean true, then the test is going to be considered having passed, and it's going to return that string. Otherwise, it returns is complete false, and that means I'm not done yet. Keep trying.
Right. And then this like 5-second wait would happen, and then it would try again. That was the thing, right? All right. So let me just deploy this. So like essentially deploying like the stack and the nested stack, which we just went through. So then we would essentially see, well, right, a bunch of permission changes. Yes, sure. Let's do this. Publish all the lambda functions and so on and so forth. And then, yeah, then essentially the test would run. And in this case, I'm pretty sure it succeeds. I tried this before. So I'd be surprised if this wouldn't be working right now. And yeah, then I think the interesting question is like, would this be something which you would use for an iterative workflow, like this, like at least a bit resembling this test-driven idea, like like writing some tests, deploying it, going back to the start.
One thing I haven't figured out yet is the tests that I have so far. I basically write and deploy to cloud and try to get it working that way. I think that and I kind of started on this journey by pushing away. This is a test that's executed from console. I think that this really needs to be both. I think there's two things. There's a few things for this to grow up. You've made some great suggestions just on this live stream that I think anyone who's considering this should be thinking about. But also, you need to be able to execute this locally. I should be able to deploy my stack and be writing my tests and running the test against it using Lambda functions. And that's not a thing that I've put together yet. I'm sure that there's a way to solve that problem and still have the custom resource, but being able to execute the same test outside of the custom resource so that we don't have to deploy it while we're building the tests. I think that would be a real win here. And then when you're done, of course, you deploy it. You get all the same benefits. And then the other thing is that test assertions where I say I query a database and I expect the value to be this, as opposed to something higher level like jest, where you can do some like real assertions and some real quality of life things. Expect log to have, expect table to have, expect event to
like an DSL
match,
style,
those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, I think those are things that we would definitely want to get to. It's definitely something I'm thinking about. I know that Sebastian, you've run Jest in Lambda. I have not yet. Yeah. It seems a little bit complicated, but maybe I'm blowing it up.
It is, and it's probably totally against the idea of Lambda, like at least the way I did use it. But it works. I mean, it's essentially like Jest works in a way, like has a model where like essentially each test file runs in a separate process. And what I did there is just delegating the test runs to like a Lambda function, which was deployed beforehand as a Docker container, like a Docker image essentially. So each test file was run in parallel.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Jest might not be the right tool for this. It might be a little bit too far of a cry for that. But some better assertion language for the tests, I think, is something that one would want out of something like this. I don't think you want to just say, well, my integration test is a database query at the end. I mean, it works, but it's a little messy.
Yeah, and I think there's I mean, we talk about this like there is an RFC in the AWS CDK RFC repository, which aims to build something like this, right? So like essentially assertions at Lambda functions, as far as I understand it. At least the last time I've looked. So it's like, I think they actually started out with a pretty similar approach, like treat CloudFormation as an executor for the tests. I think while you still could do it the way they're architecting it right now, or they're planning it right now, I think by default, the assumption is still, or like it's now to have like a local test execution, like Jest, or like, I don't know what the test execution would be in Python or Java or C# or so, I don't know. But then have the assertions described and like built as Lambda functions, like a few assertions baked into the framework more or less, or like as a separate package at least. But also have the ability to build custom assertions, like as a user. It's probably similar to this provider framework for custom resources, something like this, right? So I can easily build assertions. And I think the reasons are probably the same. Like one thing which is often stated in this context is like, okay, how do I access resources which are private, databases, stuff like this, which are part of the VPC? How can I connect to them? If I would run the test locally, I would have to poke holes in my VPC somehow, do some crazy shit there, and that's probably not worth it. So for these cases, it makes a lot of sense. However, you still have to, of course, you have to deploy the test assertions. So that's still a thing you have to do. It's like a bit of overhead, but probably it's a good trade-off. And I think, or I believe, you could still use these assertions as part as a custom resource, right? So you could use this like conceptually in the same way as you describing it right now.
I think it's really interesting. Honestly, when I saw that RFC, first of all, I was like, damn it, they're stealing my thing. But I mean, I think they're really thoughtful about the approach to this kind of thing. The more exploration we have in this area, the better it's going to be for everyone. This is a space that where I think it's holding us back a little bit, which is why I spend so much time thinking about it. So I'm excited about what they come up with.
Yeah. So, and meanwhile, the stack has been deployed, or like both, or like all stacks have been deployed. And we see a test result. So it was successful.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So like the tests are successful. Just have to parse the output here a bit visually.
Yeah.
So now let's make them fail. So how do we make them fail?
So one way that we could make it fail, I mean, it's fine. I think if you open up the event bridge,
this one.
So let's say we refactored our events. Maybe it's not the best example. Let's say we refactor our events, and if you go into just scroll up a little bit, and like the detail type there, if you change one of those detail types, you just change that to any string. Successful, maybe it could be a mistake that somebody makes, and then you try to deploy it again. What's going to happen this time is it's never going to receive that event for success, and it's going to hit the 1 minute time limit. Everyone who's watching the stream at this point is going to be happy that it's just 1 minute. We could even scale it down if we wanted to, and then it's going to time out. It's going to roll back that change. No, it'll take a minute.
We'll see.
All right, you're all stuck on the stream until this happens, until this test times out. And no one's allowed to leave.
But yeah, so I'm really curious, like how this. Well, I mean, sure, like the text, like the error output will be essentially like, okay, test wasn't successful, right?
No. It will fail the deployment, and you'll get a rollback.
Right. That was right.
It's going to fail. It's going to fail that. It in this case, for the custom resource, you only get the output string, like in the event that you care about it. So first of all, I see that you're only deploying a few resources here, right? Yeah. Because most of the stack's already been deployed because it's a small stack update. But But yeah, the way that the custom resource and provider framework and all that stuff works, you only get a message on success, because if it fails, it's going to roll back. And so you are, maybe sadly, depending on the circumstance, going through a CloudFormation error stack trace at that point to figure out what happened.
Right, since that was like that's the part where I'm curious about, like how do you know what the problem is?
Well, I mean,
Yep.
hopefully I know that I made it change, and hopefully that change was not too great. I mean, so the function in question, we could jump into CloudWatch and look at the Lambda log for that function, and we could maybe get a better idea of what's happening there. It sort of depends. I mean, in this case, the function's querying a database, right? So if it never returns a true response, or if it never gets the item that I'm after, there's not going to be a lot more there to understand what went wrong. But basically in this case, what's going to come down to is I just never got the event, so I never kicked off the workflow. I think that at that point, what you want to understand here, because you've got a distributed system and you've got something that failed somewhere in the distributed system, you need some sort of traceability, right?
Yes.
So you need X-Ray or Lumigo or whatever tool you like to use for that. You should have that instrumented, and this is deploying to our AWS account. And our AWS account is instrumented, and we can observe this whole thing and see what changes are happening in the stack, or sorry, in the application, and that's where we should find out what happened here.
Yeah, and
oh no, it worked. Dude, that's the problem with live coding. Did we?
So
what happened?
It works, but
could it? I can't believe it. Did it not get saved? It got saved.
It got saved.
Payment success rule. Well, I tried. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, before I changed the detail type on both of them, and it failed. So I don't know if we want to risk one more minute. We could try that. But I did I did get a stack rollback before by doing this. I mean, you could also change the source. All those things should affect.
Just change a bunch of them. But it's
now you'll never get an event bridge.
No, but it's like what I've been experimenting with as well. It's like, again, that's more the local approach, like having Jest running and actually using the AWS CDK to like trigger Lambda functions, upload objects to S3, trigger step function workflow, stuff like this. And then essentially have the Jest tests being instrumented via X-Ray. So like the Jest test, or like each test is essentially the first start of a segment in X-Ray. And once you instrument all the clients of the SDK, you see like the full. Well, not in all cases. There are like cases where servers are dropping the X-Ray header, the tracing header for some reason. Object Lambda, for example, it's not really respecting this.
That's awesome. That needs to be your next stream. Everyone wants to see that.
Yeah, I have like a really rough prototype, but it needs to be streamlined a bit. But yeah, sure, that's certainly coming up at some point. But the beauty of this is, since you have the X-Ray trace ID, you can actually query for all the CloudWatch logs as well. For each of the segments, you can like fetch the CloudWatch logs. Yeah. At least in the same region. It becomes a bit more complicated across regions. When you think about CloudFront, for example, where you don't really know like which endpoint you're hitting in which region, like depending on where the tests are running. But still, it's like quite nice to see like tracing headers or like the tracing segments and the corresponding logs for each test. And what I haven't done yet is like building a Jest report out of this. But that's yeah, there are some challenges around this.
There's got to be a way to stick all these things together.
Yes, yeah, I really hope so. And I think like when you combine all the different ideas which are floating around at the moment, this could be something really, really cool. Like driving tests somehow, like either locally or via CloudFormation, having assertions either locally or even as lambda functions, having like the observability, having logs, dealing with test data, stuff like this. So it's getting there. It's probably going to take a while, but I think it's a really interesting area. And
Cool.
now we hope for like a rollback. I mean, it's certainly updating stuff, updating custom resource for some reason.
Oh, I mean that's what it ought to be doing, because that's how. Yes, sweet failure.
Okay, cool. So and that's saying, okay, the custom resource failed. It's gonna roll back.
And it should say it timed out, right? Yeah, timed out. Operation timed out. And that's because there's a 1 minute limit on. It says it's going to try this every 5 seconds. You probably, if you looked in CloudWatch, you'd probably see 12 invocations of the function, and then Doesn't rule cleanup happen after the integration test? Oh, maybe. Yeah, that could be. The rule should be totally changed before the integration test runs, because they're in separate nested stacks, I think. I mean, it's a great question.
Or like the dependency, like the deployment order. That's the question, or?
Oh, maybe Matt Martz is asking, doesn't the rule revert after the integration test fails? And if that's the question, then the answer is that's how it should work. Because it's it's a nested stack, it should be rolling the whole thing back. So if we went and looked in the console, we should see that the rule is what it was originally and not what we tried to change it to.
We can have a quick look at CloudFormation. Parents app stack. Create complete update. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really used to CloudFormation.
Yeah, we could probably go look at the rules in the event bridge. If you want to pull up that service. And you just have to click on one of them to find out what are the detail, and you can see that it's successful detail type. Did it change it and not roll it back?
Hang on, let's choose another one.
We're just learning a lot of things here. No, that's for. I included a thing. WebSocket.
It's rolled back, right?
Okay. Yeah, it might have been cast.
And the other one wasn't rolled back since the deployment was successful for the successful thing.
Oh, you're right. That's right. That was successful for some reason. Okay. Yeah, interesting.
So here.
Yeah, it could have been. I don't know. It was. Yeah. So you're saying that the old rule was there for one. If we just simply redeployed the same thing again, it would have failed. That could be. Yeah, maybe we picked a bad example for. Because the rule doesn't get updated in CloudFormation, I believe. I think the rule just gets replaced. So it's going to say, oh, you've changed your rule. So that means that I'm going to add a new rule as part of this deployment. And at the very end, I'm going to take the old rule away. Okay, but why did it fail this time then? So I don't know. There's a little bit of a mystery here. I have to spend some time digging into this and figuring out how to achieve failure. But something a little bit weird there.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, still pretty cool. So pretty interesting approach. And I think like again, it's to me it looks a lot like smoke tests for production environments. So this is really useful. Since you have this, okay, it did fail. Let's roll it back automatically. So this idea. For like actual like even close to getting to test-driven development, yeah, you would need to have like more tooling around this, like either X-ray or like better error reporting and faster iteration loops probably. So probably sizing the stacks like in a way that it's not taking like hours to deploy a stack, or like even just minutes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty quick, but I also think that we'll get frustrated trying to develop only against cloud. We need to find some balances in some of those things.
Yeah, but yeah, there's lots of things to explore, certainly. And yeah, I don't know. This was pretty good, I think.
Thanks so much for inviting me to this. This is a lot of fun, Sebastian. I really appreciate it. I appreciate my buddies showing up. Thanks for that. Everyone else who watched it, and feel free to connect me if you don't already know me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It was really great. I certainly had a lot of fun and learned a lot, so that's always good. And I think we actually peaked at, I don't know, 16 or 17 viewers, so which is not bad for first iteration. But yeah, it's certainly like a very interesting topic, and I really I'm interested, and also happy to continue the conversation at some point. And yeah, and also of course for people who are joining in and leaving comments, and so I'm really happy how that went. Yeah, like a few people still actually engaged. Awesome. And yeah, like if you have topics, I'm planning to do this. I don't know. I'm not really sure about the cadence of this. So there's like one thing lined up for next week. And yeah, and just like a few other things up in the air, but like if you have topics, not necessarily limited to AWS CDK, also, I don't know, like just randomly, or like not randomly, but like around the idea of, like cloud development, right? So like in a sense where there's not really, where it's going away a bit from you run everything locally, like this classic development, you run a bunch of containers, your database, some search server, and everything runs in local Kubernetes clusters, stuff like this. More towards a world where pretty much everything consists of like a bunch of managed services, which are somehow combined together, either via step functions or like perhaps some services might offer like a complete runtime, which builds infrastructure on the fly more or less. But yeah, anyway, so if there are topics, always happy to talk about it. Just reach out. And yeah, thanks all for being here. And yeah, very appreciated, Matt. Again,
thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.